Be here. And by the grace of God, good fellowship, love and sponsorship, and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, it hasn't been necessary for me to take a drink since the 10th of August 1984. And for that I am truly grateful. It is a great honor and privilege to be here again at the Jones Beach Sunrise Group. You do such wonderful work, to contribute to the foundation, so that we can remember the people who gave us this. It's wonderful. And I would like to thank Alan so much for inviting me back. I never used to get invited back anywhere. And last time I was here, I met his mother, who's now gone, and I met Connie, his lovely wife. And I'd like to thank Richard for arranging my air travel. I find Richard very exciting. He's one of those I'd like to say, come fly with me, baby. And yesterday at the airport, Dante picked me up. And Dante thought he was picking up a Jamaican, because I lived a long time there, with dreadlocks and green eyes. I told him I can be anything you want me to be. If I was 20 years younger and he wasn't married, he's one of those I would have said, come here, little boy, I'll take care of you. Lord, it's good to be sober on a Sunday morning. Good to be sober on a Sunday morning, for so often I wasn't. I am continually amazed at the great miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am so grateful to the United States of America, because I think it is only in the United States of America in 1935 that Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob started this program, and they were able to give us the base of this program, which is a God of our own understanding. And that could only happen in the US of A, that has religious freedom. I am so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous because of the life it has given me, because I am one of those people who went all the way. I am one of those people who ended up in the gutter. And it is only by the grace of God that I am standing here. And it's a miracle to me, because there is no road here from Lincoln Road on Miami Beach, where I ended up. It is such a miracle. Because, you see, I knew there was something wrong with me all my life. Long before I ever took a drink, I knew there was something wrong with me. And the reason I knew there was something wrong with me is because people were always saying to me, there's something seriously wrong with you. I was born in Glasgow, Scotland. I have Irish blood. And I felt like a leprechaun in a Presbyterian church. And I am one of those alcoholics that Al-Anons never quite give us credit, that we have a high IQ. And from when I could think, I was causing trouble in my family, because I would ask questions to which they had no answers, and I didn't even have the proper knowledge to be asking the questions. I was restless, irritable, and discontent from when I was 2, apparently. I should have been given a drink when I was 2 years old. I was such a disturbance in my family that when I used to say, I'm going out to play, they'd say, see if you can get yourself adopted and make sure it's a Catholic. That wasn't very nice. And then every year my family would take me to Ireland. And in Ireland they would look at my mother and they'd say to my mother, she's not right, And if you're not right in Ireland, you're not right anywhere. So there was always something wrong with me. And how I coped at an early age is I began to develop the defects of character. The lying, the cheating, the stealing. because I felt inferior. I always felt less than. I always felt as if I was on the outside looking in. I never quite measured up, in my opinion. So I started developing defects of character, and these defects of character gave me an edge. Because if I had an edge, I felt the same as you. I always needed something. And because of this high IQ, I was sent to a convent to be educated by the psychopathic nuns. But of course it wasn't them, it was me. That was projection. And I did not do well in the convent because I was, by now, because I felt so uncomfortable in my skin, I had become aggressive, I was very antisocial. And at 15 I was expelled. And I was expelled from this Franciscan convent because a nun hit me over the hand with a ruler, and I figured if she gave it, she could take it. Now, my aunt had gone to that same convent and was a model pupil. And the Mother Superior came to me and she said, sit outside my office and wait for your mother to come. But try and memorize that sign above my door. And memorize it because it might do something for your measly little life. And I looked at this sign and I memorized it. And it said, of courtesy it is much less than courage of heart or holiness. But in my walks to me it seems that the grace of God is in courtesy. And way back then I wanted nothing to do with the grace of God. And I wanted nothing to do with courtesy. But many, many years later, coming through this door, a broken person, it was the courtesy you gave me that brought me in. And it was the grace of God that brought me here. So I know that that came true for me. I went on to nursing. I got bored with nursing. I left nursing, and eventually I went down to London, England. I was always a little angry at the English. It was one of my many resentments. I thought that the English had done us out of our natural inheritance. But, I could always imagine, I don't know if you ever saw Braveheart. I could always imagine myself on the rack shouting freedom. But when I really want something, then I'm a little weak under that, and I joined British Airways. And now, British Airways, I was 21. They gave me a uniform, and that uniform gave me the first sense of identity I'd ever had in my life. That uniform made me feel at last I belonged to something, because I had always felt so alienated from the human race. And that British Airways uniform kept me together. And I had, like our co-founder Bill Wilson, before I drank, I had panic attacks, and I had palpitations, and nobody ever knew what was the cause. My job at British Airways, because I had done nursing, was an overseas escort. And that meant that I would travel out to Africa, the Far East, and pick up a patient and bring them back, or else I'd take them out and come back. It was a great job. The only trouble is I didn't like people. And when you don't like people and you have panic attacks, it's very difficult to be in an aircraft. So eventually, did Alan bring me water? Oh yeah, thank you. So eventually I went to 2 psychiatrists in London, England. And I realized today what I was trying to tell them is the predisposition, personality of the alcoholic. The things I am predisposed to before I take that drink. You see, there's an old hypothetical that goes, if you take 100 people and put them in a room and give them cocaine for a month, at the end of a month you will have 100 cocaine addicts. If you take another 100 people and put them in a room and give them alcohol, at the end of a month, you will have 6 or 7% alcoholics. Why is that? You cannot drink yourself into alcoholism, obviously. It is a threefold illness, mental, spiritual, and physical. And the mental part I had with me. And I was trying to describe to these two psychiatrists what was going on inside of me. And they just looked at me, and because my last name is Gallagher, they said, "You're Irish." So then I decided to fix myself. And I said to myself, as I said on many occasions, "Self, I think that you should get married. Because I think if you get married, you will be well." So I found a nice man at BOAC in London. I found a very nice man. He was a cultured, refined, gentle man. I married a very nice man. And he married a figment of my imagination. And he took me to live in Kingston, Jamaica. And I loved it. He came from an old rum family in Kingston. And I hadn't had a drink yet. I didn't want to drink. I was afraid to drink. I knew I had the genes. And I did not know that a drink would fix me. And life in Jamaica was good. I had my BMW. We had 5 homes in the island. It was very respected. I had everything that money could buy. And after a year, I had my first little boy. And I loved that child with every fiber of my being. But just after he was born, I thought, no, I am truly going insane. For 25 years, I've been sucking it up and trying to make my skin fit. And now I feel I'm going mad. And somebody said, "Have a drink." Jamaica has 151 proof rum. It is beautiful. I drank that 151 proof rum, and it went deep down inside of me like a piece of velvet and wrapped itself around every raw nerve ending I had had for 25 years. I know there's some people here identify with that. For the first time in my life, my skin fit. You see, alcohol is the ability to go down deep inside of me and still the madness and the blackness and whatever else is going on in my soul. Alcohol is the ability to take me and put me right there. You know what there is? There is no there. It's an illusion. But what a place to be. I had found my solution, and I drank every day from that moment. I do not know what it is to have a social drink. And life was good for a long time, and after 4 years of drinking like that, my second son was born, and by then I was a chronic alcoholic. I did not mean to drink carrying that little boy, and I wish I hadn't. But I had lost the power of choice in drink. And I was becoming obnoxious now again. I'd go to the country club in Jamaica, and people used to say, "Mary, how nice to see you. We're having a little cocktail party. Do come." Now I go there and they say, "Mary, we're having a party. Please don't come." And I was causing, I don't remember a lot of things, but I'd go to the country club, and if somebody said something I didn't like, I disagreed with, I'd pick up a bottle and challenge them to a duel. And also I almost beat up a little dry cleaner for not doing my materials properly. And my in-laws took me aside and they said, "We don't know what's wrong with you. You were such a lady. What's happened to you?" Nobody knew how much I drank. They said, "You never go to chapel anymore. You don't go to church. You say you don't believe in God anymore. Something's going on with you, and you're shaming our family." So they said, "You should find God again. Find something's wrong with you." And everybody was baffled, and nobody was more baffled than me. And I had a little helper called Gloria, and Gloria took me to a Jumping for Jesus charismatic meeting in downtown Kingston. And I was the only white person there. And I like to think I was jumping higher than everyone else because I had rum. And I like to think I left them with a few new moves. But it didn't work. And I used to live across the road from Bob Marley. I lived on Hope Road in Kingston. And a record producer had given Bob Marley this big old great house. And I used to watch him with great disdain, running around these bare feet and clouds of marijuana coming up. And he brought down the tone of the neighborhood. And he didn't like me because he knew I was a drunk. Everybody knew I was a drunk, except me. And I remember one day I was in the gas station in Kingston, and he had a BMW and I had a BMW. And he said to me, "You're a narcissist and a hedonist, and you care about nothing but yourself." He said, "You're a drunk, you don't know nothing." And I was greatly resentful. And he said, "Tell me something, since you're so smart." He said, "What does BMW stand for?" I said, "Bavarian Motor Works." He says, "No, man, it means Bob Marley and the Wailers." So I had a massive resentment. But of course I used to see Bob, and when he wasn't on a skit, he'd be feeding all these people and giving them money and listening to their stories and caring about them. He was a great humanitarian. I was selfish, self-centered, self-will run riot. And I tried everything to stop drinking. You know, the people in Jamaica, they used to say to me, "Mary, come try a little sensimilla, man. Look how the liquor's making your eyes red." And I would say, "I don't want nothing that's going to mess up my brain. I'll stick to alcohol. Thank you." Eventually, I decided to leave the island. And because my husband and we didn't get along. One night, my husband developed, I don't know if I don't know if that happens with the husbands of alcoholic women. The husbands of alcoholic women develop a tic. You know. You see, when I was drinking now, I was getting very paranoid. And we'd go to our parties, and I think that he was flirting, and I was excessively jealous. And I'd come up and confront him and humiliate him in the dance floor, and he'd run me home by the neck, and we'd get in there, and he didn't drink, and I'd say to him, he'd sit down and lecture me, and I'd say to him, "Anyhow you drop asleep tonight, I'll kill you." So he would be going, and then I'd pass out, and he'd run lock himself in the room. And one night he did drop asleep, and I hit him over the head with a piece of mahogany. And he had no sense of humor. None. He called my mother in Scotland and said there was something seriously wrong with your daughter. My mother said there was always something wrong with her. So anyway, I decided to divorce him, and because of my drunken arrogance, sign over all the properties we had, the joint property, if I could get my sons. And I told him if he didn't let me take my sons, then I would publish something. I can't remember all of it, but anyway, so I had the goods on him. So I took my little boys, 9 and 5, on a journey with alcoholism. I am so sorry they had to go through that. I am so sorry, but you see, here is a baffling feature. I love my sons with every fibre of my being, but I am an alcoholic parent, and it is a terrible thing to be, and I'm so sorry that I was that. And I took them to Scotland, and then my family told me about my drinking, and then someone called, a man I knew, and he said to me, "Let's get married and I'll take you to Canada." And I thought, what a good idea. Drink Canada dry. By this time I'm having the shakes. And because I am bright, I know that I have a serious Valium deficiency. So I get a job as a pharmaceutical rep. And my territory was southern Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC. And I'm a blackout drinker on the road. And after 6 months, I sent that man away. Because that's how I was. I cared about nobody. I cared about my children. But I had no care truly for men or women or anybody else. I was selfish, self-centered, completely narcissistic. And I remember with that man, he tried his best, and I'm so sorry too that he says that I spoiled so much of his life. I don't know why he married me in the first place. He couldn't have been well, but there you go. And now it's just me and my 2 little boys. And I'm trying to do this sales job. I'm a hopeless drunk, and it's a nightmare. And I bring people home I should never have brought home. And my little boys, they would wake up through the night maybe, and the next day they would say, "Mommy, who was that was here last night?" And I say, "There was nobody here, you were dreaming." I made my children question their reality. And I never physically abused them, but they had psychological damage from being with an alcoholic mother. I was the only the only adult they had in Canada. And they'd come home and see me lying drunk. And they'd get up in the morning, I'd be drunk. And one day I followed my eldest boy, who was now 10. I didn't know where he was going on a Sunday morning, and he had become an altar boy to try and preserve some whatever it was inside. And eventually my family came and put me in detox. And when I was in detox, it was just me and 5 Native Canadians. And this was in Calgary, Alberta. And these Native Canadians, they held my soup and my coffee when I was shaken too much. They helped me when I had DTs. And afterwards they said to me that they drank because their spirit was broken. And I realized at some level my spirit was broken. And many years later, when I read the Bill Willis and Carl Jung correspondence, where Carl Jung had written back to Bill Willison and said that in his opinion, what the alcoholic suffers from at a deep level, he has a thirst for a union with God. And that the formula for the alcoholic, in his opinion, was Latin spiritus contra spiritum, which means spirit against spirit. You see, I realized I had a sick spirit, but I was drinking the wrong spirit. I had to get the spiritual action of the 12 steps for a change of personality. Amazing. I got out of there and I decided to go back to Jamaica because I wanted things to be the way they used to be. You know, in our big book it says the idea that someday, somehow, we will enjoy and control our drinking is the great obsession of every alcoholic. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Some of us pursue it into the gates of insanity and death. And that's what I did. And the night before we were going back to Jamaica, when I left Jamaica, I was 108 pounds, long black hair, bronze, a lean, mean bronze machine. Now I'm going back and I'm swollen from drinking, not eating. And I decided that I wanted to make a grand exit. So the night before we were to leave, I decided to give myself a perm and dye my hair black again at the same time. And I passed out. So I was not looking good. You know, even today I hear they still talk about me in Jamaica. I was reminded recently that in my drinking times in Jamaica, before I truly hit the skids, there was a cricketer who had come out with the cricket team for a West Indies cricket match. And he had been made a Sir by the Queen. And he found me exciting, like I find Richard. And he asked me if I would attend this function up in the hills for all the cricketers. I said I'd love to. He didn't know what a drink I was, of course. Anyway, he takes me up there, and the host, who's given this massive, beautiful party, the Sir Cricketer, goes in and said, thank you for inviting me, and I brought a guest. I don't know if you know Mary. And the host said, know her? She's more famous than you, man. So I go back to Jamaica. The children's father asked me if they could have my boys for a week. He was married again and had a little daughter. I did not know that my eldest son, who was now 11, had written to his daddy and said that he didn't want to be with me anymore because I was such a drunk. So I gave him the passports, and he was going to take them to Disney World, he said. And at the end of the week, I said to him, what time can I pick up my boys? And he said, you won't be getting them back. You're a drunk, you're a lush. And if you try and come, I'll kill you. And I went to my lawyer, and then I went to the police station, and I got 2 jeeps with 3 policemen in each one, Kingston policemen, with their machine guns. And my custody order, and we drove up to the big old great house where he lives. And they had big steps up to this great house and a big white iron rail around the whole balcony encased. And my sons were behind these iron bars. And I said, bring the key. And my eldest son said, I don't want to be with you anymore. I'm afraid you drive with me and my brother drunk. And the gardener came and threw me down the stairs. And the police pulled their guns. And I said, let's go. And I went and I had my first suicide attempt. I drank 2 bottles of 151 proof rum and 2 bottles of Valium. Enough to kill a horse. But we don't die easy. Alcoholics are hard to dead. When I hear someone say, I know if I drink again I'll be dead, I say, you wish. Some of us live forever drinking. And they pumped out my stomach, and the next day a psychiatrist came to the hospital and told me something that was very observant, intellectually correct, and definitely relevant to my condition. The psychiatrist said to me, you mustn't do that anymore. I ended up living in an old run-down hotel in Kingston, and looking up to the life I used to have. And eventually the father came and said that if I didn't get off the island, he'd do something. And he gave me some money that he had owed me, back payments for child support. He'd never given me all the time I was in Canada. And I knew I couldn't see my children, and it was torture for me. Because, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know there was a solution. I never heard about Alcoholics Anonymous. I just knew that I was so sick. And I wanted to say to people, there's something seriously wrong with me, and nobody could tell me what was wrong with me. And I was too ashamed to tell people how much I drink. I couldn't tell them. And eventually what happened to me is I left the island and went to Miami. And in Miami, I got a little apartment. I had a few sticks of furniture. And I'd get drunk and pass out, and they'd come and they'd steal my furniture, they'd steal my clothes, and they took that which I had to give and that which I did not have to give. And I ended up living at the bottom of Lincoln Road on Miami Beach. And I had 2 garbage bags that I can remember, and that was it. And all I could get on my feet, and this is the horrible thing. We laugh a lot in Alcoholics Anonymous, but this is a horrible illness. Dreadful. There was just a study done in the UK last week that of all the drugs, of any drug you can think of, alcohol does the most damage to everything. Everything. And today, look at us here. This is such a miracle. Such a miracle. I drank so much that my feet were so swollen. My whole body was so swollen. You wouldn't even recognize me. My eyes were swollen shut. My face was swollen beyond recognition. My feet were so swollen that all I could get on my feet were a size 10.5 rubber flip-flop, which eventually had to be dug out the soles of my feet because of the heat they had stuck themselves in. That is where alcohol took me. And I would scream for my children because of the agony of not knowing what was wrong with me and of being alone and desolate and having no hope. No hope. And one day I panhandled off this old woman who used to live, she's an old English woman who used to live in Jamaica and now lived in Fort Lauderdale. And she contacted my family. And they came and they cried when they saw me. And they found me and they sobered me up and asked me what I wanted to do. And I said I wanted to go back to Canada. And I did. I went back to Canada and I met a man again who I'd known for many years. He said he'd like to take care of me. I believe, he said he married me. I don't remember any of that at all. He had a good heart and he wanted to help me because he'd known me for 20 years. And the first time I tried to kill him, he took me to a psychiatrist. I am not a fun girl when I drink. I want to kill people, and especially men. And the second time I attacked him, they put me in the mental institutions. And I am a retread in the mental institution. And I love being in the mental institution because they give me all the drugs. They let me sleep 22 hours a day. I love being institutionalized. And what a life that is. You know, it's our Saturday night fun, because we were in so much prescription medication, would be seeing how if one of us could light our cigarette without burning it. And the other thing was, we were so zonked out on drugs that one would drop their cigarette butt in their paper slippers, and our reaction time was not good. So that's where alcohol took me. The last time I was there, I was taken by the police, and I was in a lot of trouble. And the psychiatrist kept me there for a long time. And they finally got me stable. And they had diagnosed me as manic depressive. I found out later that I know there are true manic depressives. I'm not saying they're not, but alcoholism looks a lot like manic depression. And when I came into AA, they told me that the highs would get lower and the lows would get higher. They treated me for schizophrenia. They treated me for psychosis. And this poor psychiatrist who kept me alive, Dr. Milliken, he was writing something to the court, and he let me read it. And it had 3 diagnoses: chronic alcoholic, abnormal personality, and depressive. I told him I agree with the last 2. He says, you are a chronic, he said, you have baffled us. We've not known what's wrong with you, but you're a chronic alcoholic. They had sent me to AA meetings when I was in there, but I was so full of drugs I never heard anything. And later some AA members told me that they used to ask me if I had any hope. And I would say I have no hope. So I got out of there and went to court and got out of court. And one night I picked up the phone and I phoned AA. And a man called Stan, who had 28 years sobriety, came and 12-stepped me. And he told me some of his story. And I listened to him. And then I told him some of mine. And he said something that nobody had ever said to me before. He said, I think you're one of us. And I said, Stan, I know I'm an alcoholic, but I'm also nuts. I have a psychiatric report that says I'll need medication for the rest of my life. He says, Mary, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous is like 12 adjustable wrenches. They fit any nut that comes through the door. He made me laugh. He made me laugh. I had one slip. My dry date is the 10th of August, 1984. On the 9th of August, 1984, I was in very bad shape. I'd been drinking and trying to come off it, and some AA members came and took me to a meeting. Don't ever say you can't take a wet drunk to a meeting. We belong. Yes, where else do we belong? They tell me I was in such bad shape, I was shaking so much, strangers were waving back at me. And that night, a little gal called Linda, who had 12 years sobriety, spent the night with me. And the next day she said, I'm going to leave, you know, because you're a loser. And I only stick with winners in Alcoholics Anonymous. But before I go, I'm going to ask you to kneel down and say the third step prayer. I said to her, I kneel for nothing. And then something said, think of your children's eyes. And I remembered an aborted attempt to see my children in Jamaica not that long ago. And I had called because I had been on prescription medication and I wasn't drinking. And I had said to the children's father, can you allow me to see my boys for a week in Kingston? I'll take a hotel room, bring them to the airport, I'll rent a car. And he said, okay. And I left Edmonton, Alberta, full of joy to be seeing my boys. And when I got to Toronto to change planes, I bought a bottle of vodka. And when I landed in Kingston, I was so drunk I couldn't come down the steps of the aircraft. And I collapsed in front of my two little boys. And they turned around and took my boys away and said, not this time, not this trip. And I remember my sons looking over their shoulder at me. And I had all their Christmas presents. And I left without seeing my boys. And I remembered their eyes. So I knelt down and I held her hand and I repeated the third step prayer after her. God, I offer myself to thee, and from this I have had no desire for a drink. Some unmerited gift of grace was given to me. You know, William James, who's mentioned in our big book, who's written The Varieties of Religious Experience, the book that Abby brought to Bill when Bill was sitting on the bed after his spiritual experience. In that book, William James, who was called the father of American psychology, had done a study into these dipsomaniacs. That's what they called alcoholics then, dipsomaniacs, who had been the dregs of society, and overnight something had happened. Some paradigm shift of consciousness had happened to them, and they became upstanding members of the community. And he investigated these people and said, what happened to you? And he said that the common denominator, the turning point, seemed to be that these people had reached a place of absolute and complete despair. And I believe that that absolute and complete despair is an aperture, an opening, a surrender for the grace of God to come. And I think that's what happened to me. And I got right into AA. I got a sponsor immediately. I went to 3 meetings a day. Can you imagine if Alcoholics Anonymous was just about not drinking? You know, Alcoholics Anonymous is not about not drinking. It's about a change of personality. Appendix 2 in the big book, it says, you know, we have to have a change of personality if we're ever going to recover from this illness. If Alcoholics Anonymous was just about not drinking, I went to 3 meetings a day for my first year. And I would go into that meeting and they'd say, did you drink today, Mary? I'd say no. They'd say, see you at noontime. And after a year, I'd be dead. And on my tombstone, it would say, she didn't drink, but her head blew apart. So very quickly, after 6 weeks, I did the fifth step because I hated myself. And I got very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I started to laugh. And I used to go to a meeting, a shifters meeting on a Saturday morning, and they had a front row, and it was called Shaker's Row. And all the newcomers were sitting there. And we felt good because we were all squeaky clean and fully dressed in our right minds, that we thought. And, God has a sense of humor. I remember sitting there with these guys one day, and we're all sitting and I see one of them next to me. He looks up in the wall, and then I look up, and then we're all. Yeah. And there was like a big horsefly up in the wall, but I don't know if it's really there. And I don't trust their judgment. So I don't want to ask. So the old timer, old Ernie behind me, he said, "It's really there." I learned to trust your perception and not mine. And, I love this story, and I tell it all the time. Bill Wilson was my higher power for 10 months. Bill was my man. I could quote Bill. I just loved Bill because I just loved Bill. And everyone said, "You can't have Bill as your higher power. He's dead." I said, "Not to me, he's not." And then they said, "Mary, you've got to find a God of your own understanding. What do you think it was when you said the third step prayer?" I said, "I don't know what it was. It was some kind of miracle, but I don't understand it." So I ran around looking for a God of my own understanding. And one night, I'm in this, the Alano Club meeting, and I heard this old woman from the Northwest Territories speak. And she was the most spiritual woman I'd ever heard. But she was saying things like, "As a drunken woman, I never went to bed with an ugly man, but I sure woke up with a few." She says, "But I don't do it anymore. I don't do it anymore because I am a lady in Alcoholics Anonymous." And I went up to her and I said, "Who is this God you have? I'm looking for a God." She said, "Mary, my God's called Harold." I said, "Harold?" She said, "You know that prayer, 'Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name'?" She was pulling my leg. But I found a God of my own understanding, and I am so grateful because I know that, every morning, and I get up for these 26 years, and I kneel down, and I say, "Dear God, Heavenly Father, please keep me sober this day. Dear God, Heavenly Father, please keep me sane this day. Dear God, Heavenly Father, please walk with me this day and show me the way. I love Thee, my God, and without Thee I am truly nothing." Because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I was beyond human aid. And that is why I think that we alcoholics are the most, we should be the most grateful people in the world. Because we know what it is to be beyond human aid, when nothing can stop you from drinking. What a gift this is we've been given. This is a great miracle. And this is why I never want Alcoholics Anonymous to change in any way whatsoever. Last night we were having a discussion, and someone said, there's been a lot of problems still with drug addicts coming into AA who are not alcoholics, but they say that they belong in Alcoholics Anonymous because even though they didn't drink alcohol, a drug is a drug is a drug. And that may be so. I don't know. But it doesn't matter because this is Alcoholics Anonymous. And without a singleness of purpose, as Bill Wilson said, we shall perish. Singleness of purpose. We concentrate on one thing and do it well. And we don't do that to be mean. But it's only that in the history of the world, nothing has ever helped alcoholics before, except for the Washingtonians, and we know what happened to them. I got a message that my son would be going to Toronto to go to school for a year, my eldest son. So I spoke to my sponsor. I called into a group in Toronto. 2 alcoholics met my plane and took me to a meeting and then took me to the YWCA. And I went to all the meetings in downtown Toronto. I got a job, I got an apartment, and I saw my son for a year. And then he went back to Jamaica. And then I fell in love in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. There's newcomers here, so I'll just say this again. You know, you'll be told that no relationships for a year. Nobody ever listens to that. They'll say, where does it say that in the big book? No. But it's a wisdom, you know. But they said to me, no relationships for a year, and for you it's 2. Because you have a propensity for getting married. And after my son went back to Jamaica, I went to a meeting on a Sunday morning, and I looked down the table and I saw him. And I just knew that God had sent me my reward. And here's what happens when you fall in love in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and you haven't had the necessary personality change. You know, it says in the 12 and 12 when boy meets girl on AA campus. Don't you love that? It's so poetic and moving. Underneath it said they should both examine themselves to see there is no deep psychological disorder that would prevent. But I don't like that part. I don't like that part. That's a white part. So John and I fell in love in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. He had these eyes. He was 5 years sober and I was 2. Now, I was a great AA member, red hot AA member. I had a sponsor, Rini, who was just died 3 years ago at 52 years sobriety. Active woman in Alcoholics Anonymous. Had a sponsor, had a job, was very active in my group. But I was crazy still. You know, I was crazy before I drank, so it's going to take me a long time. And like attracts like. You see, until I get well, I will attract my insides on the outside. like I have an antenna. John had these big eyes. You know, they say the light in the eyes of the people is spirituality. Sometimes it's psychosis. And my eyes were just like that. So here's what happens. You fall in love in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and you've on your peacock feathers. And you go to a lot of meetings and you strut your stuff. And someone asks you to read how it works and your eyes flit across a crowded room. And I could see John and I wandering off into the sunlight of the Spirit. With Bill and Bob in the heavens. With the circle and triangle underneath. Like the sun, saying, bless you, my child. And I shared this vision with my sponsor. My sponsor spoiled it. She said, don't get married, you're an emotional retard. And I knew she was jealous. So John and I eloped. We got married in Melbourne, Florida. My youngest son was going to the Florida Air Academy. He'd been sent there in Melbourne, Florida. And we went and got married there. I saw my boy. And here's what happens. In the close intimacy of marriage, when you haven't had the necessary personality change, in a really close relationship, you become psychotic. And one by one, in that close intimacy of marriage, the peacock feathers start dropping off. And in the end, all you have is the same 2 old turkeys sitting staring at me. See, that's what used to happen to me. I would fall in love. And him and I would be like Velcro. And then after about 6 months, the thrill is gone, and I'm off looking for that ding-a-ling-a-ling someplace else. Because I like the magic, you know. And I had to leave that marriage because one day I used the old knife trick, and my sponsor and an old-timer ordered me out the house, and went back to the Y, 5 years sobriety, went to a lot of meetings, and knelt down again and said, God, show me the way. And got a little job again, got an apartment, and got a call from Jamaica when I was 8 years sober that my sons had been kicked out of their father's home. I spoke to my sponsor, Rini. I said, what should I do, Rini? I had a Jamaican passport at the time, and a Jamaican citizen. I could go back and work. She said, go back to Jamaica and make amends to the island. I went back to Jamaica. I lived with my old ex-mother-in-law, and my 2 sons were living with her. And I sent one to Broward Community College in Florida and one to Scotland. And I worked, and I got very active in Alcoholics Anonymous. It does not do that well in Jamaica, unfortunately. Some of the other islands are very good, but it doesn't do that well in Jamaica. But I tried the best I could. And I worked with the poor people down there. And Clancy, my sponsor, Rini, because I had been going through something in my mind at that time that Rini didn't understand, she said, why don't you call Clancy and tell him I said to ask you to sponsor him, to sponsor you while you're in Jamaica. Because at that time I was with United Floral Exports and I was flying up and down to Miami all the time in the floral business. And I called Clancy and I said, I wonder if you'd sponsor me. I know you're in Florida a lot. And he said, send me a little bit about your life. So I wrote him about my life. And a few days later, I got a call, and it was Clancy. He said, I thought it was imminent that I call you. I just got your letter. And I thought he was going to say, I'd never spotted you. And he said, there's something that I had to tell you, and it's very urgent. I said, what is that? He said, you really shouldn't drink. So he sponsored me for the 2 years I was in Jamaica, and then I went back to Canada and back to Rini. And what happened is you get to make living amends. And these living amends are things you can say yes or no to. Now, I had done all the amends I knew how to do. I didn't know what other amends I had to do. And I know that was in the mind of my God. And when I got back, I took an apartment in the same building where John and I had lived. We hadn't divorced yet, and we were friends. We loved each other, but we just couldn't live together. And one day I went up and I found him lying on the ground. He'd had a massive stroke. And he'd been lying there for 2 nights and 3 days. And if I did not have the key of his apartment, he would have died on the floor. And it was March, and the windows was open, and he was turning purple. And I said, if he lives, I'll take care of him. And he was in hospital for 1.5 years, and he could never speak again, and he couldn't understand the spoken word. And he was a brilliant lawyer. I mean, he was just brilliant, articulate, loved to read. He had severe global aphasia and paralysis. And he taught himself to walk again. True alcoholic that he is. He started fighting with the staff in the hospital, creeping about at night, trying to steal the wheel-trans. And eventually I had to put him in a behavioral unit, and then I took him home. And I had him home with me for a few years. And he couldn't speak, but it was the most spiritual, loving, and I'm so grateful for it. You know, he couldn't talk at all, but I truly believed he understood what I said. There was only 2 words John could say, and I can't say them from the podium. He said them with alarming regularity. And what they meant in essence was take a journey. And he loved Florida, he loved South Carolina, and we drive up and down. And he died in October 2001. And before he died, I read him how it works. And then I held his body till he grew cold. and I finish something of worth for another human being. That's what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me. It has made me into a person who cares and who knows what is the right thing to do, and to do the right thing always. I remember when I did not know how to gain the personality change, and I was still so new in Alcoholics Anonymous, I spoke to an old woman in Alberta. I said, I don't think I can ever change. She said, you have to change. I said, how can I change? She said, quit doing the things you don't like yourself for and start doing the things you do like yourself for. And my sons, I brought them up to Canada. We lived together until I sent them off to be self-supporting through their own contributions. And, we loved each other, but they're two crazy guys. And my eldest son got married, and he married a lovely Greek girl on Vancouver Island. And he called me and said, Mommy, in the Greek culture, a husband and wife, the mother and father of the groom walk the groom down the aisle. He said, I called Daddy in Jamaica, and Daddy said, he'll come up. Will you come? And I called Clancy at the time, because I couldn't get Renee, and Clancy said, of course you'll do it. He says, remember, you can think what you like, but you have to act right. He said, and I'll have spies to see that you do the right thing. So I flew out there, and my ex was there, and I had made amends to him, but I still had some anger at him about taking my kids, even although I knew it was the right thing to do. And he said to me, my God, you look well. This Alcoholics Anonymous has done miracles. We all thought a leper could never change its spots. And I'm standing there with my AA Madonna stance. Thank you. You do look so well. So did your lovely wife. With the large S that comes from spiritual living. And inside I'm saying, 20 years ago I hired 2 gunmen to shoot you. But I got drunk. And my son on Vancouver Island has given me 3 little granddaughters, Nina, Bella and Gia. And I go out every year and I look after them to give their other grandparents a little rest. And they are the ones that tell me they love me more than fresh vegetables. And the innocence of that just strikes my heart. They just love me. And my other son, Mark, my crazy son, Mark, he got married in a kilt in a Ukrainian Orthodox church. And danced with me to a tune called Mama. And gave me 2 little grandchildren, Maya, who's 9, and Aiden, who's 5. And I took 2 years after John, my husband, died, and looked after little Maya, because my youngest son had been 7 when he was taken away from me. And I thought, here I get a chance to do something. And this alcoholism goes very deep. My son, Mark, he still has his house in Toronto, but he got a 5-year contract in Aruba. And last year he sent me a first-class ticket to come down. And it was a wonderful trip. And now this is a long time since I drank. And one night it's getting dark outside. And my son is sitting with his back to me having dinner. And I said to him, don't you think we should bring Maya and Aiden in, son? It's getting dark outside. And without turning around, my son said to me, and where was I when I was 7, Mom? And it just broke my heart. But I realized that, as Bill Wilson said in the big book, it may take a lifetime. He said that in the family afterwards, it may take a lifetime. Alcoholics Anonymous, I get what I need in AA. I get what I need. I have a very active life. I do everything I'm asked to do for Alcoholics Anonymous that I can do. I sponsor girls, crazy women. I get some crazy women. one of them has fired me 4 times. And I keep taking her back, and I keep talking about her because she drives me insane, but I love her. And I tell her, I talk about her all the time because she will not eat. And she thinks if she eats the right things and does gymnastics, she'll get a spiritual, metaphysical, whatever. And sometimes I'm sitting there and she's nattering away to me about her latest holistic whatever. I can see myself putting my arms around her little scrungy neck and saying, "Shut up!" But I don't. I just say, "Keep coming back, darling. Keep coming back." I had to go back to work because, John was home many, many years, and eventually, I wasn't working because I had to look after him 24/7. And I started to look for a little job, and I said, "God, give me what I need." And I found this job in a private healthcare service. I only wanted to work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday because a lot of times I'm off on Fridays to conferences. And this job I went to, the woman said, "Oh, we'd love to have you, but we just need you Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday." So I get that. Life is good. I'm certainly not the woman I want to be, but I'm not the woman I used to be. I strive all the time to be the best that I can be. I get chances to do amends all the time. And these 2 old aunts who came and dug me off Skid Row many, many years ago, I went to see them in Scotland this year. And I was only there a day when one of them had an epileptic fit, fell on the 83-year-old, broke the 83-year-old's foot. And I was able to look after them. And for the first time ever, they said to me, "It's a miracle. We think God sent you." And they're the ones that used to say, "See if you can get yourself adopted." They're the ones that came and did so much for me and look after my children. And we get a chance to look after them. Life is good today. I am so very grateful. Our co-founder, Bill Wilson, said once that Alcoholics Anonymous is not a success story. Rather, it is the chronicle of our colossal human failure, turned to usefulness by the divine alchemy of a loving God. Thank you so much for having me here.